Hey folks, my name is Brian and you are watching Survival on Purpose. In today's video, we'll talk real quickly about knife sharpening. We'll go over some of the tools that I use to sharpen my knife and how you can keep your knife sharp. Stick with me, thanks. Okay folks, back here in my beautiful basement studio again, and I'm going to talk about knife sharpening. So let me preface this video by saying I am absolutely not an expert knife sharpener. I like a sharp knife, and if I work with it I can usually get them sharp, but there's people that I've seen on YouTube that are just like so far beyond my abilities, it's unbelievable. But I'm just trying to make a regular video for regular folks, show you how to keep your knives and tools sharp, and as sharp as you can get them for common use. So if you want to split an atom, you know, I'm not going to be able to show you how to do that. But ever since I was a kid, I've had this fascination with keeping my knives sharp. So, you know, maybe I can show you a little something anyway. So let's get to it. Let me readjust the camera and I'll show you what I do to keep my knife sharp. Okay, so I've got these things kind of artfully arranged here for a minute to show you just an example of some of the things I've got to keep my knife sharp with. I've already done a quick review of this. This is a Smith's Pocket Pal. And this is why I just keep this with my knife or in my pack, and that's what I use pretty much in the field. That, along with this Lansky's tactical rod, which is a diamond rod and has a carbide sharpener here for a carbide sharpener right here, and then it's got a diamond covered rod here. And the carbide's obviously for putting, I say obviously, but maybe you don't know. So carbide blades are typically, they're going to cut more metal quicker. So they're harder than most steel, and what they'll do is they'll take a rough edge or a edge that really needs a lot of work and bring it into a shape or condition where you can actually sharpen it. So they're not really for final sharpening, they're pretty much to get a knife ready to put a final sharpening on it. And this one's got the carbide and the diamond. It's a Lansky's tactical rod, somewhere around 18-20 bucks. The Smith's Pocket Pal's got the same thing. It's got the carbide here, and then it's got ceramic here for finishing, and it's also got a little diamond rod here, kind of rough for sharpening serrations and whatnot. And they actually have a new one out now that's got a little light with it and a whistle and some other cool stuff, and it's a little bit more money, but it's pretty neat. But these two are two little things you can carry in your pack. Also just got this, it's pretty good to carry in your pack, and it is a Smith's diamond, portable diamond hone, I guess. And it's got a coarse side and a fine side, and diamonds are really good. It's nickel impregnated with diamonds, which is really a really good cutting medium to remove some steel. And after all, that's what you're trying to do when you're sharpening a knife. You're basically removing steel from the edge to bring it back into as straight and smooth a line as possible. Okay, and then the old standby that I like to use at home, this is a bench stone. This is a reasonably fine one. This would be a kind of a coarse one. They have a lot of different sizes. I like this one because it's big, and it's actually got a base. It stores inside the base like this, so you can kind of protect it. It's from Lansky, and this is an oil stone, so you can use honing oil. It's really a good idea to use honing oil, not petroleum-based oil. I don't know what this is. Maybe this is mineral oil of some kind, but mostly they recommend not to use petroleum-based oils on stones. And finally, after you've got the, and we'll talk about this in more detail in just a minute, but I've got a homemade leather strop that I made out of just glued a piece of leather on a 2x4, and I use this Herb's Yellowstone stropping compound. There's all different kinds of stropping compound. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube about it, but this is one I chose, and who knows if another one would be better. So let's talk just for a minute about sharpening. Now, this is an old hickory knife that I bought for like $8, and I've worked with it a little bit, mostly with this Smith's and with the Lansky a little bit. And it's got a better edge on it than it had when it came new, but it's still not what I would consider super sharp. So I'm going to go over the principles of sharpening, because once you know that, then really, you know, it's kind of, you have to just kind of work your way into learning by touch and feel how to sharpen a knife. But Basically, if you look at the edge of this knife right along, I'm not going to run my finger on it, on the edge here, what you're looking for is for that knife to be as straight and as narrow right there at the cutting edge as possible. So you want it to be as narrow as possible, with as few molecules as possible, and them all in a line. It's going to be as sharp as it can be. And what happens when a knife gets dull is that little sharp edge there actually becomes rounded maybe, or it gets nicks in it where it's not smooth. So depending upon what kind of shape your blade's in, your first step is going to be to this one's in pretty good shape, so we probably don't want to use too rough a stone on it. But if your blade's pretty dull, or if you need to do some serious reshaping, maybe you don't like the bevel on the blade or whatever, you want to put a sharper bevel on it, then you want to use something that's pretty rough, which is like the yellow side on this Smith's hone here. And then basically, and I saw this on an Andy Tran video and I really like the way he does it. I've always used a stone like this, and that's still the way I use a bench stone pretty much. And it is definitely challenging with a longer knife, because, and I'll show you what I mean with a shorter blade here. Okay, so I've got a shorter blade here, and see, it's very easy to, obviously you can get the whole blade across. You want to move in a motion this way, just like you're slicing a very thin slice off of the stone. And you really don't want to be dragging it this way. You're not taking as much metal as if you're moving perpendicular to the edge. Well, with a long knife, you know, the smaller the stone, the harder it is to do that, because if you're cutting across, you have to kind of almost slice it downward. And then at this point, at this round part here, you're really not even pushing laterally. You're more like dragging parallel with the edge, and so you're not really doing as good a job of taking the metal off. So you almost have to develop a feel where you can kind of work it like that. And the really long blades, you might have to do almost 2 stages and try to blend them. It's kind of tough sometimes, but what you'll see is you'll hear and you'll develop a feel as you practice, that you'll feel when your knife is smooth going across there when it doesn't feel right. And that's the best way I can describe it, when it doesn't feel right. But every blade has an angle. And so what you're trying to do is mimic or replicate the angle that's there when you're sharpening it. Because if you look at it like this, okay, and there's your blade, okay, if you're off, and maybe your blade's like this, and you got to take this whole part here off, well, that's a lot of cutting to do. So some blades have a compound angle. I'm trying to do this with my fingers, so it's kind of funny, but it comes in here and then to the very point here. So you want to match this angle here, not this one, because if you match this one, you're not even touching the blade here. So you want to match this one here, and then as you take metal off. Now maybe you want to reprofile it, which means you want to take this corner here off to break it to be more like, instead of a corner, you want it to be like that. In that case, you're going to need a really coarse stone, and you have to really spend the time taking that angle, that corner or that shoulder off of the angle. That's called a compound edge, and a lot of knives have that. Anyway, what I was going to show you what Andy Tran does instead of slicing across, and he said, I like his idea here. There's 2 problems with slicing across. First of all, if you have a short sharpener like this, then you don't really have very much room. You see we're hitting there. You know, you almost got to kind of do that with it. And you're cutting towards yourself too, so if you slip, you're going to cut yourself. So I'm giving Andy full credit for this technique here now, but you put the knife and brace it in a, and I'm not going to brace it here because you can't see it, but in a upright position where you can see the angle on the edge, and then you can actually just guide it down, and you can turn around and do the same thing on the other side and match that angle. You can see that angle that you're looking for, and you can bring it down. So that's one way to do it. There's also crock sticks you can use. Again, this is really for the field, and I really got this specifically because of and Andy uses a Lansky sharpener. This is the one I happen to be able to find handy, but it's the same principle. And if you can do this, if you can kind of feather it out, then you can even do a longer blade without having to compromise the angle. And you can do the same thing from the other end and find your right angle. So that's going to help you get a longer knife edge going. So that's how you would use this kind of sharpener. Okay, and what's cool about this is it just comes apart, sorts right there in its handle, you throw that in your pack and you're good to go. And you've got a rough edge to touch up a a coarse edge to touch up a rough edge, and you always want to finish with a fine. So these three I would consider my, field type sharpeners. So when you've got the bench stone again, typically you're going to use that like you're slicing. So what you want to do with this one, it's an oil stone, so you want to put just a couple drops of oil on it. It doesn't take much. Just a few drops, and then just kind of basically spread it around and just start trying to slice off metal. Not slice off stone, I mean pieces of the stone. And this is a good activity to do to build your patience, because it can take a long time to really get a sharp edge on your knife. And you'll find after a while that if you use lighter strokes, then you're going to wind up with a finer edge, because it's more of a polishing thing. So that's how you use a bench stone. Now, I didn't talk about this Lansky rod. This is very similar to a sharpening steel, like you would see a chef use a chef steel. And you're going to do the same thing with that. You can either do it like this, and that's going to pretty much straighten the edge out. And the main thing again is that angle between the sharpening surface and your blade. You want to try to maintain a consistent angle, and you want it to be the right angle. And you can tell, I've heard, I think I heard Dave Canterbury talk about how when the angle just locks in, you can feel it. And this is something you really just have to work with and practice, but you can definitely feel when you're hitting the right angle. So that's one way to use this steel. The other way is just to do the same thing as we were doing with the other one, and just hold the blade stationary and move the steel. And I kind of like this method because it just gives you really, really good control and allows you to really see that edge you're putting on the knife. And you do the same thing with the other side. So that's how you use the steel. The Smiths, the disadvantage of this, in my opinion, is you don't have an option on the angle. This thing has got a little ceramic V's in there, and as you pull it through, it basically sharpens your knife, puts an edge on whatever angle that's set at. These are set at about 22 to 25 degrees, somewhere in that neighborhood, 22 and a half, I think, maybe 25. That's it. It doesn't matter. If you try to vary it, you're just going to mess up the angle on the other side. So you want to keep it vertical, so you're splitting that V in half so you got the same angle on both sides, and just pull it through. And if that's the angle that you want on your knife and the angle that you have on your knife, then it'll do a very good job of maintaining that edge in the field. And actually, if it's not the angle you have on the knife, but you would like it, the carbide side does a good job of putting that on there. So that's the 3 field sharpeners, and that's the bench sharpener. Now, and this knife's not quite ready for it yet, but it is getting there. Just to show you, let's see. Not quite. We'll give it a little longer, but the third step in the process, and the finishing step, and the reason I made this strop rather, is you may have always seen like an old barber's chair, they have a big leather strop and they strop that straight razor. What that's for is when you sharpen a knife, you actually create a little burr possibly that kind of, and this is extreme exaggeration, but the metal curves over a little bit on one side. It's a very, very, very thin piece of metal, a burr that could break off. And what stropping does, and the difference in stropping and every other type of sharpening, we're cutting into the surface of the sharpening surface. On stropping, you want to put the angle and pull away. Just pull away from the edge, so the edge is trailing, not leading. And then the reason I have this stuff here is this is just like a slight abrasive, and some people don't even do anything but straight leather. You can put some of this on there though, and it just helps give it just a little bit extra polishing. It's almost like polishing compound on jewelry. It actually gives it just a little bit of a polishing effect and helps give it that smooth that edge, because again, the smoother you can make that edge, the sharper it's going to be. So you just want to pull it back across like that. And they say if you got your knife pretty sharp, then it won't take very many times to do this. But one of the things you want to really be careful about and try to pay attention to anytime you're sharpening, do anything, you want to do an even number of strokes on each side, so you don't have the edge get all lopsided on you. Now, this is not perfect, but it is a lot sharper than it was. And one test you can do is take your thumbnail or any nail and just scrape it. And if you're scraping up pieces of nail, as you can see right there, that's a good indication of extreme sharpness. Now, you know, I always used to shave. The danger with that is you could cut yourself pretty good. And not quite there, but if it's shaving sharp, it's sharp. Okay, so this is an open nail knife I just bought. It's pretty sharp, but it's not shaving sharp. So as you can see, so we'll take a few minutes on the bench stone and see if we can get this to shaving sharp. A few drops of oil. Oops. Spread it around a little bit. And find the angle. And see, with the knife blade this short, it's like 3.5 inch blade. It's the perfect size stone. So there you go. Took a little work, probably 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, but went from pretty sharp to shaving sharp. Basically, I used the bench stone, used a little finer, a little harder stone, and strop. Hope this has been helpful. Just certainly by no means a very detailed, know-it-all, complete coverage of how to sharpen your knife, but it's how I do mine. It's how I keep my knives. I took this open nail from pretty sharp to razor sharp, and pretty cool tool here. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If so, please leave your comments below if you got anything to add. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that know a lot more about sharpening knives than me. Really like to hear what you have to say. I appreciate your watching, appreciate your comments, and thanks for subscribing. It really helps when you do. Just thank you. My name is Brian. Once again, you're watching Survival on Purpose. Remember, survival is not an accident, so be prepared. See you next time.